Aloha, welcome to Chappie's Tiki Bar. I'm Chappie and this is Badger substituting in for Mookie. Don't worry, Mookie will be back next episode. So today we're gonna make some pizza and I'm going to do the process of curing the pizza dough. So I'm getting this recipe from Kenji Lopez-Alt. I have his book, The Food Lab. I'm a big fan of Kenji. This recipe is actually on his YouTube channel. The name of the YouTube channel is j.Kenji Lopez-Alt. But I'll put the link in the description. I really like his book, The Food Lab. There's a lot of science behind the cooking methods, and it's a must-have if you're a home cook or enjoy going the extra steps in preparing food. This process of curing the dough, it's for a thin crust pizza, and we're gonna dry the dough out. I'll go through everything step by step. So he actually does a lot of research, a lot of trial and error, a lot of test kitchens, and he actually went to Chicago to get this thin crust pizza. Also, this thin crust square cut pizza was developed in Speakeasies in Chicago, so it's definitely not the thick cut pizza. So I'm going to give you the step-by-step recipe. I'll also put that in the description. Now it looks like he's doing the curing process he got from Vito and Nick's in the Southside of Chicago, which was started by Pat's in the Southside of Chicago. And this is also sort of Midwestern square cut style thin crust pizza. The first time I had this pizza was actually in Great Falls, Montana at a place called Bebop's, which is now closed. But Howard's Pizza in Great Falls still does this Midwestern style thin crust dough. Okay, so this is Kenji's dough recipe, and it's important to use baker's percentages with a measuring scale, because obviously like flour can get compact in a cup and it can throw the measurements way off. So he starts out with 300 grams of bread flour. He said you can also use all-purpose flour, 7.5 grams of salt, and again we're using baker's percentages, so if you want to do a different ratio, it's 2.5%. And then for the sugar, same as the salt, 7.5 grams or 2.5%, and that's the percentage of the 300 grams of all-purpose flour, or as he uses, bread flour. And then he uses very little yeast, because this is a thin crust pizza. He only uses 1.5 grams of yeast, or 0.5% yeast, and then 30 grams of vegetable oil, or 10%. And he said you can actually go higher on the vegetable oil, or a little bit higher, because the oil is going to give it the crispiness and the brownness. And then 150 grams of water, or 50% of the flour that you're using. So he mixes the dough in his mixer, but he just incorporates everything, and then he lets the dough hydrate for 10 minutes, and then he kneads the dough for 5 minutes. He does it in a stand mixer with a dough hook. I'll probably knead the dough by hand, and you're going to want to roll it out into 14-inch pizza crusts. And when he rolls it out, he rolls it over a semolina flour. And then he actually says that he got this curing process from another Chicago pizzeria, Kim's Uncle in the south side of Chicago. But again, the curing process, actual curing process started in the 1970s at Pat's, which was also in South Chicago. So basically, he's going to let the crust dry out, sit. He puts it on a piece of parchment paper. He lets it sit for 12 to 24 hours, so it dries out. I tried flipping it after 12 hours, but it actually dries out too much and cracks. So just leave it, don't touch it. Let the top dry out for a good 12 to 24 hours, and then he builds the pizza. and puts it on a pizza stone in the oven for 500 degrees. So we'll get started on making my pizza dough. And again, I'll go step by step, and the recipes in the description below. Okay, so this is the recipe from Kenji Lopez for Chicago thin crust pizza dough, and we're going to be using baker's percentages in grams, and even the liquid we're going to do in grams. At one time I tried to do convert the liquid into cup measurements and ounces, and it just didn't work. So it's much easier if you do everything in grams. So we're going to start out with the bread flour. Okay, so I got it at 0, so we're going to try to get 300 grams of bread flour. That is 200. I'll just put that in the mixing bowl. We need another 100. Okay, that is just about perfect. Next up, we're going to do the salt. So we're just going to do 2.5% or 7.5 grams of salt. All right, and the same for sugar, 7.5 grams or 2.5%. That's about perfect. Now, a lot of the dough recipes, they do a certain temperature water, put the yeast in, and then add the sugar and add the salt later. But this all just goes into one bowl. I think because it's thin crust, they're not too worried about the yeast and how it's affected by the sugar. So we're going to put the sugar into the party. All right. Next up is the yeast, and it's very little. It's actually 0.5% or 1.5 grams. So I don't know if my scale, this is just a home scale, if it's that accurate, but we'll try. That's pretty close. I got 1.6, and that's very little yeast, but that is what the recipe calls for. All right, next up, the oil. You just need a neutral oil or a vegetable oil or a very light olive oil. And we're going for 30 grams or 10%. And Kenji did mention he has seen recipes with a higher percentage. Little splash. There we go. Or sorry, 30 grams. And that's going to go into the party. Next up, last but not least, we're going to do 150 grams of water, or 50%. And his recipe doesn't really call for a temperature. It looks like he just used room temperature. $153. $146. One more splash. We'll go with 149 as a winner. All right, next up, I'm just going to use my dough hook to incorporate the mixture. Not kneaded or anything like that. We're just going to mix everything together, and then we're going to let it hydrate for 10 minutes. All right, we just want to get that flour off the bottom there. All right, I'm going to turn the camera off, and we're going to let it hydrate for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to knead it for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to put it in its special container so it can overproof for 5 days. So here we go. Thanks for watching another episode of Chappie's Tiki Bar. I'm Chappie and this is Mookie. What's that, Mookie? Mookie says life is hard. That's just the way it goes. But sometimes it goes the other way. See you next time on Chappie's Tiki Bar.